there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is end-time newsman Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today's Monday, April 6, 2015. Trends research publisher Gerald Celente is standing by to give us some New York Italian common sense about the madness going on in the world. Later in the program, we'll hear from Reverend William Lindholm from the National Committee for Amish Religious Freedom. He's going to tell us how government agencies in the U.S. are persecuting Amish families. Who would persecute Amish families? Give me a break. If you live in Nevada, I'd like to meet you next Tuesday night at the Westgate Hotel in Las Vegas. That's next door to the Las Vegas Convention Center. I'll be in town to attend the National Association of Broadcasters Convention. Send us an email at info@truenews.com to let us know you're going to be coming to the event. Just put Vegas or Las Vegas in the subject line. Now, the event is free, so bring a friend, bring family. You can also call us at the office at 772-569-8880 to tell us that you will be there next Tuesday night, April 14, at 7 p.m. It's the Westgate Hotel. That's the former Las Vegas Hilton, next door to the Las Vegas Convention Center. Next Tuesday night, April 14, 7 p.m. Listen to this. Russia has taken control of an abandoned NATO military base in the Arctic. 3 Russian ships spent the winter docked deep inside the once top-secret massive complex buried into a mountain. NATO closed the base in 2009 and sold it. The new owner leased the former NATO military base to Russia. Norway's former vice admiral said shutting down the base was pure madness, while other critics say their submarines now have to travel hundreds of extra miles to protect the region. The new owner, Gunnar Wilhelmsen, said, quote, "There are no longer any secrets surrounding this base, not since the military and NATO agreed to put it on sale over the internet, along with photographs of every nook and cranny." End of quote. The Los Angeles Times published an article today titled, "Intent of Russian military aircraft near U.S. shores remains unclear." The L.A. Times article pointed out that Russian bombers have been flying within 50 miles of the California coast. The clueless L.A. newspaper can't figure out what the Russians are doing there, flying around California in nuclear bombers. The article said, quote, "The Russian flights are in international airspace, and it's unclear whether they are testing U.S. defenses, patrolling the area, or simply projecting a new assertive Moscow global power. Analysts say Putin's government may be ordering the bomber flights as a morale booster for the Russian military that saw its ships turned to scrap, its aircraft grounded, and its bases closed after the Cold War." End of quote. Kenya fighter jets bombed a jihadist camp of real Muslims today. The bombing campaign was in retaliation for the bloody massacre last week of 148 Kenyan Christian college students. Most of the students were beheaded or shot. Many of the Christian young people were forced to call their parents and tell them they were going to be decapitated. Students who cried out to Jesus Christ to save them were tortured before being executed. Hey, I have some good news. Middle Eastern newspapers reported today that a deadly skin disease is spreading quickly among ISIS jihadists It's a parasitic infection caused by sandflies. The disease leaves large wounds, and that eats away at the human flesh. So let's pray it spreads to every ISIS member and to the politicians and intelligence officials in Washington who secretly support them. Let's take a short break. Gerald Celente will be here when I return. This is True News.
You're listening to True News, the end-time newscast. Rick will return after this announcement.
Are you defeated by the same things over and over again? Dr. Stanley helps believers understand the root cause of our struggles. Here's today's moment with Charles Stanley.
We get defeated when we start thinking what we have no business thinking. That is the beginning of our defeat. And you see, what happens is this. We get to feeling and imagining and fantasizing and all the rest. And then if we don't deal with it, it gets into our will. And we make a choice and we make the wrong choice. Helmet of salvation protects me right up front in thinking the right thing. And here's what you're doing. You are affirming what God said. You are expressing faith in God. You are trusting Him that if you put on the armor, He's going to protect you. And here's what you'll discover. Things that would normally slip up on your blind side, when you start putting on the armor, you can see it coming. You think, seen that before. I've heard that one before. You can see it coming. Whereas oftentimes, it gets up on our blind side, and before we know it, we're defeated. We have thought or said or participated in, our conduct is not what it should be. He says, put on the full armor of God. That is every piece of it. If you leave off the helmet, you know what's going to happen. The breastplate, you know what's going to happen. Leave off the girdle of truth, sandals of peace, lay the sword down, forget the shield, and you've had it.
You're listening to True News. We are your daily vaccine to protect your mind from mental viruses spread by the establishment news media. Let's take a brief look at what we are told by the mainstream media is reality. John Kerry will, without a doubt, be the recipient of the 2015 Neville Chamberlain Award for his role in negotiating a treaty with Iran that gave Tehran everything they wanted. Meanwhile, the Iranians are openly saying that Mr. Obama is outright lying about the terms of the treaty, a treaty that will not be submitted to the U.S. Senate for debate and ratification because Mr. Obama is now a dictator. An Iranian journalist who was present inside the negotiations defected. He said the U.S. negotiating team led by John Kerry was not representing the United States in the negotiations. Instead, the journalist claims he personally witnessed Mr. Kerry in the U.S. delegation negotiating on behalf of Iran and pressuring France, Germany, and the other Western nations to cave in and accept terms favorable to Tehran. A so-called Islamic rebel supported by the USA in the war against the Syrian government was photographed several years ago standing next to a smiling John McCain. That man is now the leader of ISIS in Libya. Yemen is under siege by Islamic fighters backed by Iran, and Saudi Arabia is leading a Gulf coalition to attack Yemen and the Iranian-backed fighters. 10,000 or more Iranian fighters are on the Golan Heights next to the Israeli border. Weeks ago, the U.S. House overwhelmingly voted in favor of sending U.S. military weapons to Ukraine to fight Russia. A high-level delegation of Russian generals met in Germany last month with a delegation of NATO officials. The generals delivered a personal message from Vlad Putin. Come another inch closer to the Russian border and Vlad will nuke you. The establishment news media today is wondering why the Russian military took control and moved warships into an abandoned NATO base inside an Arctic mountain. Meanwhile, most of America's allies, including Great Britain, France, Germany, the Philippines, South Korea, and many more, rushed to sign up as partners of China's new financial institution that will challenge the U.S.-controlled World Bank in Asia. Well, who can I ask to make sense of all this stuff? It's none other than Gerald Celente, the publisher of the TRUNEWS Journal. the magazine that reports and analyzes history before it happens. Mr. Celente is the founder of the Trends Research Institute. The website is trendsjournal.com. Gerald, make sense of this stuff for me.
Well, the only sense I can make of it is nonsense and no sense. And all I can do as a trend forecaster is look at our work with the understanding of tracking trends as an understanding of where we are, how we got here, so you can see where we're going. And if you look at how we got here and where we were, you have to go back to World War I. That's every issue basically that you just touched upon. And that was the carving up of the Ottoman Empire by the English and the French, the Sykes-Picot. You look at these maps of the Middle East. Hey, Rick, give me a T-square and a ruler, and let's draw some straight lines and fabricate countries. That's all this is. And, you know, you look at what's going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia, for example, and what's going on in Yemen, and you start looking at the history. This goes back 1,300 years ago. You know, with the death of the Prophet Muhammad and, you know, who succeeded him and why and how, and this just keeps on going. So as an American whose Pledge of Allegiance is to this country, and you're speaking to me from colonial Kingston, New York, where the most historic four corners in the United States are, the only place where there's a stone building on each corner that's pre-Revolutionary War, I honor thy founding fathers, beginning with George Washington at his farewell address, no foreign entanglements. And then you listen to Franklin and Adams and Jefferson and Madison, one after another. And the world was at war back then. So the United States is putting itself in the middle of something that's been going on now for 1,300 years, no end in sight, and only getting worse. And again, the only thing that I can say, again, as a trend forecaster, in looking at where we are, how we got here, and where we're going, the Middle East policy in the United States has been nothing but disaster after disaster. So why would anybody think that any steps taken now will prove any results that are going to be positive? And again, in putting my allegiance with America first and honoring thy founding fathers, I would say to any foreign policy expert, anyone in Washington, from the president to Congress to the Senate, fix Detroit first, then go to Camden, stay a night over at Trenton, go to East St. Louis, go around the country, fix up all these rotting cities and rotting infrastructure, then tell me how you're going to fix the Middle East.
Gerald, as a professional trends researcher, is the trend that you're following now, is this madness? Because I don't know any other word to describe it.
It's total madness. And I also suggest that anyone would consider going to Dr. Paul Craig Roberts' website. It's paulcraigroberts.org. He was, as you well know, the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. And like myself, people that have been there and been around, you know, we have no respect for what's going on in Washington. And these are psychopaths and sociopaths. Why would anybody believe them with track records of nothing but failure? If anybody could show me a success, hey, I'm all ears. Show me. I am sick and tired, Rick, of seeing every one of these losing generals, retired lieutenant colonel, this and that, telling us on all of these prostitute media stations what we should do next when all they have is a track record of failure. Nobody can get away with this in the real life when you have to earn a living and prove your successes. So now all they're doing is giving us more prescriptions for failure. Look at our foreign aid budget, forgetting about the defense budget. $50 billion. $50 billion going down the drain and into the pockets of corrupt governments and people that don't need our money while we need it at home. I'm outraged at this.
Gerald, let's break down some of these specific things that are taking place in recent weeks. The China Infrastructure Bank, the AIIB, quietly, without the knowledge of most, average citizens, the entire Western world signed up as partners of this new China bank, which is essentially a challenge to the World Bank. How significant is this development?
It's very significant. And let's go back to looking at why and how it happened. China, of course, again, people forget this. We were sold out by cheap labor through Bill Clinton. China became a member of the World Trade Organization 2 weeks after 9/11. Nobody knew it even happened. Bush squeaked it through. It was one sellout president after another. You look at China's debt from 2000 when they joined, 2001 when they joined, to now. It went from $2 trillion to $20 trillion in debt. So now they have this major economic power that, selling us our products made by slave labor and multinationals bringing into the nation. They wanted a bigger say in the World Trade Organization and the IMF, and Congress wouldn't give it to them. So what did China do? They started forming the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank. When Britain joined it, the United States went berserk. They threatened them not to join it. They joined anyway. Following Britain, after the UK, we saw France, Germany, Italy join. Australia joined. And not only the Western nations, South Korea has joined. There's even talk that later on Japan may join. You see what's happened, Rick? The business of China is business, and the business of America has become war. I'm driving over the Throgs Neck Bridge yesterday, coming back from Long Island up to where I am over here, and it's Easter Sunday, right? Here's this big, sign flashing. If you see anything suspicious, call, Homeland Security number or some BS like that. All they're doing in this country is selling fear and hysteria. So going back to the AIIB, think about it. Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. For the last 10 years, China on average has invested, just to think of the word infrastructure, 8.5% of their GDP into infrastructure. The United States, the grand total of 0.065% yearly. So anathema to America is investing in an Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. America is squandering its resources on exactly what General Dwight D. Eisenhower, five-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces, and two-term Republican president warned us about. The military-industrial complex is robbing us of the genius of our scientists, the sweat of our laborers, and the future of our children. So the United States' pivot to Asia is a pivot toward war. With China, it's a pivot toward business, and it's growing. So that's what's going on. This is real, and you look at the numbers already, Rick. China's looking at $100 billion in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The World Bank only has about $65 billion into it. It's a real threat. And again, we're squandering our resources on these losing wars.
Is a global financial reset underway right now? Yes.
But the thing is that people think, the dollar's going to crash and China's going to boom, and they're in trouble as well. It's a look at the markets. Look what happened on Friday. The numbers came out for new job employment, and they were half of what the, quote, experts predicted. They were lower than half. There's no job growth, and the only kind of job growth is with lousy jobs. So then Monday comes along, and boom, the markets shoot up. On the good news that the job report was so terrible that the Federal Reserve was going to not raise interest rates. And we've had 0% interest rates now for over 6 years. And who is it hurting? It's hurting every one of us working people. They used to put money in the bank and get a savings rate on it, and people actually used to retire on it. Now all of the 0% interest rate is doing, it's fueling the equity markets worldwide, going back to why there's a global problem. It's in Europe. It's in Asia. It's in Japan with their Abenomics, in Europe with their Dragenomics. All of this negative and 0% interest rates are fueling the equity markets because the big-time investors, as they like to call them, they're gamblers. Big-time gamblers could borrow money for nothing. You look at the merger and acquisition activity. That's why the markets are going up. They're borrowing money for nothing and doing all of these multinational buyouts. The other half of the gains in equity markets have come about through record low interest rates, allowing big companies to buy back their stock. And that's what's juicing the equity markets. So Abenomics in Japan, equity markets up some 60%. In Europe, they're hitting 60-year highs as they're funneling in their version of QE2. In the United States, the 0-point interest rates keep bringing the markets up to new highs. It's created a global bubble, the likes of which no one has ever seen in history. Is this just rhetoric? Here, I have one for you. You know, Rick, you're a nice guy. I'm going to sell you my German bond. Hey, I'm Germany. You could trust us. Here's the deal, Rick. Sign on the dotted line. Give me the money in 5 years when this bond matures. Because you're such a nice guy, I'm going to guarantee you a negative yield on the bond. Or, in common terms, you're going to get back less than you put into it. Who in their right mind would do this? And I'm talking about Germany. I'm talking about Austria. I'm talking about Switzerland and Sweden. This is unprecedented. The Netherlands, one country after another, selling bonds at negative yields.
Gerald, last month, I had a fascinating dinner conversation with an Asian businessman who lives in Shanghai. He's not Chinese. He lives in Shanghai. I'm not going to identify him. If I gave his name, you can easily search it on the internet. You'll find his name and the position that he has. It's a very prestigious position. And he was in the United States. He listens to True News. He wanted to meet me, so he came to Florida, and we went to dinner. And I asked him, Gerald, about, I said, you know, I keep reading these stories and seeing these photographs of these vast Chinese cities, these empty cities, brand new cities that are empty. And I said, what's the story with it? And he laughed. He said, Rick, there's nothing sinister, nothing conspiratorial. It is a giant Ponzi scheme. Because, you know, a lot of people who know about these empty cities are wondering, what is China preparing for? Why are they building these cities and there's nobody living in these cities? Gerald, this is what he told me. He said, you know, because everything's state controlled, he said that the banks are promising outrageous returns, all right, to depositors, and that they are using pension money to build these cities, and they're promising these returns. And he said they can't keep this up. There's nobody moving into these cities, and they just continue to build the cities because there's so much money pouring in to these bonds. And he said it is the biggest Ponzi scheme you've ever seen. Have you heard this explanation of these cities?
Of course,
yet?
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
So you're aware of that these cities, these empty cities in China, are totally fake. I mean, they're real cities, but there's nobody living there.
I know that. You're looking at 70 million vacant luxury apartments in China. 70 million. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was saying to you. You look at their debt. That's why I said there's not going to be any winner in this. You're looking at their debt went from $2 trillion to $20 trillion in 10 years, basically. And then you look at what's going on. The smart money's pouring out of China. There's a Chinatown booming up in virtually every place around the world. The smart money's flooding out of there.
Okay, so but we're being told China's going to be the new leader of the economic system, but they're as broke as us.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. Why
right. So who in the world is going to put this thing together?
It's not, and that goes back to what you were talking about earlier as you were going through the news. When all else fails, they take you to war. People say to me, Mr. Celente, what kind of business should I get into? I should get into the business of propaganda. You could do it very cheaply. It could really be stupid, and you'll get great results. You
make me laugh, Gerald.
I mean, it's true. I mean, look how
you obviously don't have to be too smart to do what these guys do.
Exactly. You have to be shrewd and sick, and that's who they are. They're shrewd and sick.
Hey, speaking of shrewd and sick, are you excited about the 2016 presidential election between Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush?
It's not even a two-party system anymore. It's a two-family system. It's disgusting. It's a disgrace. To me, as I've said before, the Republicans and the Democrats are no different than the Bloods and the Crips. And I don't say that sarcastically. They're both murderers and thieves. How many more people do they have to slaughter around the world in the name of bringing freedom and democracy? And how much more of our money do they have to steal in names of too big to fail, tax breaks, loan guarantees, and bailouts for their buddies? Let's call a spade a spade. And then you look at, they're a disgrace.
Why don't they just have one nominating convention and we'll nominate Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush on one ticket? Hillary's president and Jeb is vice president 2016, and then in 2020 they can flip it around and Jeb can be president, or they could just be co-presidents.
And they should be, because look at the great track record that both of them have. I mean, look at Hillary Clinton's illustrious term as Secretary of State. Oh, peace on earth, goodwill to men everywhere. We came, we saw, he died. She laughed after the murder of Gaddafi. You saw that on television. It's all over the YouTube. It's all, anybody could see it. The United States, by the Pulitzer Prize the Nobel Peace Prize winning president, invaded a sovereign nation who did nothing to us, Gaddafi, killed over 30,000 people, supported the people that they now call ISIS to overthrow him, and she laughs about it. And the Bush family, oh, wonderful. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. Yeah, mission accomplished. The accomplishment is they killed over 1 million people in Iraq. They destroyed the joint. And there are a lot of people that want to get even with America. They deserve I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's split the presidency between the two of them so they could destroy the nation hand in hand.
A couple of weeks ago, one of my listeners emailed me and said, "Hey, Rick, you got to check into this. There's something strange going on at the State Department." And she had a friend who was trying to get some visa issue resolved, and they were going through their U.S. Senator's office, and the senator's aide told this person, "We can't do anything right now. The internet is down at the State Department. It's been down for days." And so this listener asked me, he said, "Do you know anything about this?" I said, "Well, I'll check into it. I get these kind of tips all the time, but I don't really have time to track it down." But Gerald, I did a little bit of research, and it wasn't that the internet was down. The State Department email servers were down, and the State Department said those dirty, no-good Russian hackers had gotten into the State Department email server. I'm trying to say this with a straight face. Those dirty, no-good Russian hackers were in there. And I was like, what are you talking about, Russians? Hillary's there with her vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, who can get away with this? Who can get away with what she gets away with? Who can get away with any of them get away with? It's a disgrace.
They're criminals. Why not just call them what they are? They're criminals.
They're criminals. Again, I want to know who knew what when with the Iraq War. How come we got led into this? And these people that call themselves Christians, what would Jesus say about all of this? I'm tired of them using that as well.
That's right. And good, devout Christians are voting for these people without doing their homework. Just because somebody uses that term does not make them a Christian. And a lot of good people have voted for criminals and murderers and psychopaths. And we got to stop it. Gerald, before I let you go, the one issue that's really troubling me the most is this insane provoking of Russia.
Oh, yeah. Rick, we detail this in our Trends Journal over and over again. This was an overthrow by the United States of the Ukrainian government. Like them or not, it was a democratically elected government. Corrupt, yeah, no more corrupt or less corrupt than the ones that preceded the Ukrainian government. Anybody could see Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State, Washington Press Club, December 13, 2013, over one shoulder Chevron, the other shoulder ExxonMobil, saying that the path Ukraine should take is to follow the one set forth by the IMF, the International Mafia Federation, and that Ukrainians are Europeans, which is big news to all those Ukrainians that think they're Russian or have Russian ancestry. But that's our Secretary of State. Number two, people forget or never knew that the two people appointed to Burisma Energy, the largest energy company in Ukraine, that it was Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, and Devon Archer, who's the business partner of Christopher Heinz, of the Heinz 57 variety, who is the stepson of our Secretary of State. Number two...
You're not suggesting...
What?
You're not suggesting it's who you know, are you?
Oh, no. These are the two brightest people in the entire world that should be on the board of directors of Burisma Energy because of all their great skills in the field. They are number one and number one. The other issue is who in their right mind thinks that they're going to defeat the Russians in a war? I have a chart that someone sent me. It's a famous graph of Napoleon leaving Poland with 422,000 troops. And then getting to Russia, and you could see the lines getting smaller, and then going back to Poland with 10,000. Hitler launched the greatest military offensive in world history and lost. And people forget that Russia played a very big part in defeating the Germans in World War II. It wasn't John Wayne. So the thing...
Napoleon met the same fate, too.
Excuse me?
Napoleon met the same fate.
But that's what I was saying. Napoleon came back to the Russian border with 10,000 troops.
I'm sorry. I thought you said Hitler.
I'm sorry. I did. Well, first I meant Napoleon's leading with the chart, and then secondly Hitler, 100 years later, doing the same stupid act and losing all of their troops as well.
Gerald, this meeting last month that was just reported last week in the Sunday or in the Times of London, that a delegation of Russian generals met with a delegation of NATO officials in Germany and delivered a personal message from Putin himself. I'm going to nuke you if you continue to aggravate me. To me, Gerald, that meeting was the equivalent of the weigh-in of boxers just before the grand champion, world champion match. This is like where your final insults to each other.
Let's go back to the facts and why this is happening. Again, I mentioned Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Assistant Treasury Secretary. He was in the Reagan administration when they were cooling it out with Gorbachev. This was the deal, that the Soviet Union, when it was dissolved, would give back Eastern Germany to Germany. In return for that, NATO would not expand beyond where they were. Slick Willie Clinton broke that agreement, and they expanded. And now they're in Lithuania, they're in Latvia, Estonia. NATO grew, by about 12 countries. The United States and the neocons keep provoking Russia. You just saw that site that they put on with a convoy going from Poland all the way up to Lithuania of American armaments. What if Russia? Do anybody remember the Cuban Missile Crisis?
It's like Russia doing a military convoy across the Mexico-Texas border.
Exactly. Actually, they were 300 yards away from the Russian border recently, up in Lithuania or Latvia, one of those two. And so we keep provoking you don't poke the Russian bear. And just to put this into context, they can't win in Afghanistan. They can't win in Iraq. You think they're going to beat the Russians.
It's because their whole system is crashing. This is the final gasp of the cabal that's been running the West for the last 50 years. And they're gasping. And it's they don't care about the rest of us. It's just they're trying to hang on to power and money. And they're willing to push the world towards World War III in a desperate attempt to keep control.
Yes, you're right. And again, this is, it's Easter. And, that all good Christians should remember, the teachings of Christ and, that who believe in it. And this is nothing that is any resemblance to semblance at all to Christianity. It's peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And this is what we need.
Gerald, last question, Occupy Peace.
Well, we're postponing it. We were going to do it May 2nd. We're going to be holding it on September 20th to coincide with International Peace Day.
All right. And that'll be there in Kingston, New York? Yes,
it will. Colonial Kingston, New York. I'm looking right across from me at the courthouse, the Kingston Court, the courthouse here. 90% of America's Constitution came from the Constitution that was written in this courthouse. And some of the jurors there were John Jay and 3 other Supreme Court justices. This is where the seeds of democracy was sown. And as I said, let's honor thy founding fathers and do what they fought for, and that is to protect America, to build its spirit, to build its enterprise, and to build its integrity and honor.
All right. Gerald Celente. He is the founder of Trends Research Institute and the publisher of TrendsJournal.com, a great magazine. Sign up for Trends Journal at TrendsJournal.com. Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you, Rick.
All right, let's take a break. When I come back, you're going to hear how the Amish are being persecuted in some American states and cities. Don't go away. You're listening to True News.
Reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ, you're listening to True News, the end-time newscast.
This is Max McLean. Have you testified for the Lord today? Listen to the Bible from 2 Timothy 1. Do not be ashamed to testify about our Lord, who has saved us and called us to a holy life, not because of anything we have done, but because of his own purpose and grace. This grace was given us in Christ Jesus before the beginning of time, but it has now been revealed through the appearing of our Savior Christ Jesus, who has destroyed death and has brought life and immortality to light through the gospel. Guard the good deposit that was entrusted to you. Guard it with the help of the Holy Spirit who lives in us. From 2 Timothy 1. Listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
The Bible says that faith comes by hearing. Be able to hear the Word of God today and every day. To hear more, go to radiobible.org.
As a special thank you gift of support to our faithful listeners for the month of April, True News is making available a new shipment of updated portable world band radios. These efficient, easy to use, and easy to carry shortwave radios make the perfect gift to introduce a friend to international broadcasting, or even as a backup to what you're already using. Never miss another broadcast of True News on shortwave again. These radios include a tunable AM antenna, a 15-foot long-range wire antenna, self-tuning capabilities, and memory for over 500 preset stations and frequencies. These radios are battery operated with the new enhanced ability to recharge via USB from your laptop or personal computer. Many listeners have written telling us how much they enjoy having their very own personal communications backup, and the improved features of this new model make this radio a must-have. This thank you gift is available now with your gift of $129 to the Ministry of True News. Simply go to TRUNEWS.com. Click the support button and make your gift. The mailing address for your check or money order for $129 is True News, P.O. Box 690069, Vero Beach, Florida 32969. Thank you for listening to True News, and thank you for your support.
This is True News, the Christian source for global news, analysis, and commentary. I'm Rick Wiles. I was born a few miles south of the Mason-Dixon line, so officially I'm not a Yankee. Seriously, I grew up in Western Maryland, and it was a community of hardy descendants of German Protestants who fled the Papal Wars in Europe in the 18th century. In addition to Lutherans, German Reformed, and Dutch Reformed Christians, there were many brethren, Mennonites, and Amish. Most of the Amish, however, lived over on the north side of the Mason-Dixon line in south-central Pennsylvania, places such as Greencastle, Waynesboro, Chambersburg, Shippensburg, Lancaster. Generally, I believe the Amish have a warm place in the hearts of many people. They are devout Christians who keep their religious and cultural identity, mind their own business, work hard, raise good, law-abiding children, contribute to the betterment of society. In recent years, however, a growing anti-Christian hostility in America has targeted the Amish for persecution. For example, numerous Amish dairy farms have been raided by federal and state SWAT teams over the outrageous crime of selling raw milk. Currently, a Wisconsin Amish family is facing eviction from their home because they are unwilling to comply with building codes that violate their religious beliefs, namely a requirement to have electricity in the house. Reverend William Lindholm from the National Committee for Amish Religious Freedom is on the telephone to tell us what is happening to our Amish brethren. Reverend Lindholm, welcome to True News.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have very good fond memories of the Amish because of my upbringing in Western Maryland, and I find it difficult to believe that in this day, 2015, that the Amish of all people are coming under attack by aggressive, hostile city, county, state, and federal government agencies. But these aren't isolated cases, are they? It's happening in a growing number of places.
Well, it has happened. There's only one place that I know of that's happening right now. There was a couple of spots in New York State, and they have been settled. And the one in Wisconsin seems to be very difficult to settle. And I don't...
What was the issue in New York?
Same thing as in Wisconsin, building codes. See, the Amish, they are primitive Christians, and they still live the way they did 200 years ago. And so now if they go to build a building, they have to sign a document for the Uniform Building Code. And many of them won't sign, and because the building code permit says that they will abide by all the rules of the state. And some of the rules is that they have to have smoke detectors. And so they said, well, we don't believe in that. We believe that God will take care of us. And to tell God that he won't take care of us is, we believe, an affront to God. And the authorities say, well, you put the building, or you put the smoke detector in, and we'll come and inspect the house, and 5 minutes after we're gone, you take it out. And the Amish say, well, that's dishonest. So you see, it's a very complicated situation, and I have no idea why they need to, get so strict all of a sudden with these Amish people.
How did the New York case end up?
They just went away and let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty in Washington, D.C. filed a United States District Court case against the New York people, and apparently it would cost them a lot of money to defend it and so forth, so they went away. And then there was another place in New York that did the same thing later, and this committee reminded them that it's already been settled by an agreement with the federal court. And so they, after a while, went away too. So, but they won the case in Wisconsin. Pardon me.
Now this one's ongoing right now, and this involves
the good thing was that they were evicted from their house. They came and put yellow tape around it and put a placard on there that they had to move out. And this family has 4 children, and these 4 children are very young. One of them is a baby. And so they didn't know what was going to happen to them. And then their attorney, who is helping them, the Amish won't hire any attorney. They don't believe in they believe in the Sermon on the Mount, turning the other cheek, and so forth. So, and it also says in the Bible that if you have a problem, in the Old Testament says, leave and go somewhere else, which is what they do. So they didn't know. I guess there are about 13 families there that have been under arrest.
Under arrest?
In Wisconsin. Go ahead.
13 Amish families in Wisconsin under arrest?
Yes. Some of them have been charged $42,000 in fines.
For what kind of crimes?
Refusing to sign a building code and refusing to follow the building code.
All right, now this latest case, I believe the couple, Amos and Vera Borntrager?
Correct.
Okay. They have 4 children, small children. How old was this house that they were evicted from? Do you know?
Well, I imagine it was brand new.
So it was new. They built a new house.
Yeah, because it didn't. They required a building code, and
most likely they paid cash to build the house, right?
Yes.
Okay. All the Amish I've ever known, they don't take loans. They pay cash. So they put their savings in and they build a house, and if it's built by the Amish, it's the sturdiest house you've ever seen. If they build houses like they build barns, I've been in a lot of Amish barns. They're solid barns.
The wood that they use doesn't have a government stamp on it. It's their own wood. They cut down the trees and make the lumber.
You mean the way real men used to do it years ago?
Yeah, because you see, they still live the way they did a couple hundred years ago.
So that's illegal now in America.
In Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin.
Yes.
So this family who had never harmed anybody, never violated any criminal statutes, just a good, decent family. They pay cash, they build a house, and they're evicted. The state took the house from them.
Yes. But their attorney appealed this to the next court up, and the judge decided to postpone the eviction last week. So they have some limited time to figure out what's going to happen if the higher court does not. You see, in 1970, there was another problem in Monroe, Wisconsin, where the Amish would not send their children to high school because when they moved there, they came and said, you've got to go to high school to age 16. So they sent their kids to high school, and they told their girls they had to wear shorts for gym. And the Amish father said, well, we can't allow that. And so they pulled them out and began their own school, which is illegal because their teachers were not licensed college graduates. They're rather eighth graders. So they were all arrested, 3 Amish fathers, and we appealed that case for them all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court said you cannot do that. The United States Supreme Court unanimously said you cannot do that. So now we're back in the same state where this case started, and they're trying to force them to do this. See, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't understand why every court in the land, including the Supreme Court, says that they have a right to religious freedom. This judge now in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, says that they don't.
What is it about the state of Wisconsin? Why are we seeing a hostile environment in some governments of Wisconsin?
I don't understand that. Somebody claims it's the building industry that doesn't want anybody to mess with the building codes. I don't know whether that's true. I haven't been able to answer that question for you yet.
Well, and the building industry's been thriving in America for many, many years. And, I've never seen them going after the Amish. The Amish are such a small part of the marketplace. To me, it seems like it is an antichrist spirit among secular, progressive, far left people in government who simply hate anybody or anything that reminds them of God.
Well, it could be. As I say, I haven't got a finger on it yet.
Right.
What about there's some reason why they're pressing the Amish at this time.
Reverend Lindholm, what about Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin? Where's he at on this issue?
There is a representative that is going to put a bill into the Wisconsin legislature to exempt the Amish, and she went into the governor's office and talked to him, and he said that he would sign it if the bill comes across his desk.
I'm sure you're paying attention to what's going on in Indiana. The state passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and the homosexuals, the far left, the progressives, the socialists, the Chamber of Commerce, they all jumped on this thing. And now they've got these Republican legislators shaking in their boots. They're not sure they want to stand for religious freedom anymore. Is this troubling to you?
Yes, it certainly is, because the bill is very similar to the one that Bill Clinton passed in the National Congress in 1993. And Bill Clinton says when they passed this that what the law basically says is that the government should be held to the highest level of proof before interfering with someone's free exercise of religion. And this judgment is shared by the people of the United States. That's what President Bill Clinton wrote in 1993. And they claim that in Indiana, that's what they're trying to do, just to put a state bill through that's very similar to the national one.
What about on the issue of vaccinations? Where do the Amish stand on that issue?
Well, there are various groups of Amish, so the very conservative ones probably would not do it, but...
So it's a matter of personal choice?
Yes, I think.
Okay, now, a lot of states this year are either enacting or considering bills to repeal state laws granting a religious exemption on vaccinations. So we're seeing another push from the far left,
yes,
lined up with the pharmaceutical industry.
Yet with the Amish people. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's something else that will come up. But
no, it's coming. I assure you. A number of states have already repealed the religious exemption law, and that's going to go after all of us.
We haven't arrested any Amish yet, or we'd have been involved.
What about the raw milk controversy? A few years ago, we read about federal and state SWAT teams coming in on Amish farms at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and arresting the farmer and seizing the dairy barn and such. Is that still going on?
We don't know because nobody has contacted us to help out. So that's all I can say about that.
Okay. Do you know about those cases that
yes.
happened in those food co-ops and such? Yeah.
Oh, yes. I haven't heard of it recently.
I as I grew up in the country, Reverend Lindholm, I wasn't on Amish farms. I as a boy, I worked on at a Mennonite farm, milking cows. And, one of the joys being a boy at that time, was to go into the milk barn and, go to the big old milk cooler and get a ladle and dip out raw milk and drink it. I don't recall any boy dying from drinking raw milk. Do you?
No. I drank milk until I was 30 years old, and then I quit for some reason or other.
but it never hurt us, did it? And it was just as normal, as natural as life, But now the state and the federal government says it's illegal. Of course, the dairy industry is involved in that. So you've got big government, and maybe you're right about the building industry because we're seeing how big business is lining up with big government to squash the freedoms and liberties of a lot of people. One last question. Sometimes when I travel outside of the USA, in the Caribbean, Central America, South America, I will come upon pockets of Amish communities, Amish families that relocated into those countries and started farming. Are we going to see an increased migration of Amish families out of the United States?
Well, I can't answer that, but the reason you're seeing them because it has happened sporadically over time. There's several of them that moved down to Mexico and so forth because they wouldn't let them have religious freedom here. And as I say, they always move. They don't fight. They don't do anything like that. They just disappear.
Very peaceful.
And that's what they would do in Wisconsin if they can't have. Well, there's one man by the name of Mast that was arrested. He said that they could use his barn, he could farm there, but he couldn't live in the house. So he's moved someplace else. So there are still problems there, yes.
Well, listen, we appreciate you being here today. My guest, Reverend William Lindholm from the National Committee for Amish Religious Freedom. Thank you so much, sir.
Nice talking to you.
Hey, as we close the program, I want to remind everybody in Las Vegas and all the surrounding communities, anywhere in the state of Nevada, if you can get to Las Vegas next Tuesday night, that's April 14th, I will meet with True News listeners at the Westgate Hotel. That's formerly the Las Vegas Hilton, next door to the Convention Center. It's next Tuesday night, April 14, 7 p.m. It's absolutely free. Bring friends and family. I'd love to meet you. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow.